All right, welcome everybody. I think we're in episode, what, 4, Jim? Is this 45 now?
5.
Gosh, it's flying. Hope everybody is having a great week and certainly appreciate you guys, as always, chiming in with us. Jim and I, as you didn't hear, we're in Orlando, Florida for IT Nation. And it certainly hasn't put a damper on this event. It's insane. Last night at the Solutions Pavilion, you could barely walk. There was that many people here.
Yeah.
So it's certainly a good turnout. In terms of today's agenda, I really was hoping that we could do something collaborative in nature that we would all benefit from. And so kind of I'll set the stage. Earlier this week, actually late last week, a lady by the name of Naomi Buckwalter, who's a virtual CISO. She has a LinkedIn following of about 60,000 people. And she comes from big financial in terms of her role as a CISO, but she posted something on LinkedIn that caught my eye, and it was an essential security checklist for SMB. And Michelle, I don't know if you have it handy. Could you just share it real quick with everybody? Awesome. And by the way, happy to get this. I guess, Michelle, you can get it out to everybody, post it, or get it to anybody. But it's such a, I think, simple but fantastic hygiene checklist. What caught my eye was, cloud security essentials, and how we certainly could do more than 6 quick check boxes when it comes to cloud security. I thought by getting, certainly Chip on the call and, all of you, great. Yeah, I agree, Tim. Absolutely, we'll get it too. It's a PDF, so we'll get it out to everybody. What I thought would be great was to do a collaborative conversation on what could the proper cloud security assessment look like, in terms of what are the basic or the bare bones, what are the essentials, almost our version of CIS. And in talking to the folks at Black Hills, I spoke to Bo, who's going to be running the SaaS Alerts webinar, where we've got fantastic attendance registration already. Said, Bo, if you were to design, because all he does is one of the best in the country, possibly, who knows, at cloud pen testing. Are there any standards you'd look at? And he immediately wrote back to me. He's like, I would definitely look at the PCI DSS cloud security standards and their checklists. And so I'll have Michelle also drop that into chat if you haven't already, Michelle. And wanted to first kind of take thanks, Michelle. That's perfect. You've been showing it as well. If you just kind of scroll down just a hair and stop there. But scroll up just a hair, Jim. One of the things that caught my eye was, what we're dealing with at large right now, especially in post-pandemic world, which is, we're accessing solutions in the cloud, typically from home. And what did, by the way, in terms of doing an assessment, what did a partner come up and tell you literally 15 minutes ago?
Yeah, so we were at the booth, and partner that's in trial with us right now said, you got, within the first 5 minutes of me turning on a customer, I saw a login from Belarus. And I said, wait a minute. So after further investigation, it was a compromise of the 365 tenant. He was able to lock everything down within minutes and essentially, get the new user account set up. So no damage done. But he specifically said, look, without SaaS alerts, I wouldn't have been able to catch that.
Yeah. And so I'll say just 1 or 2 more things, and then I want to open it up for comments and also ask Chip a question. So then we were sitting at lunch next to an MSP I've known for many years, Keith Bartol from DKB, runs a great shop. I was telling Jim his story. In 7 years, they're over $500,000 in MRR. They're absolute machine, security first MSP that really focuses on their own internal security first. They deal with a lot of regulated customers. And I said, Keith, assume we could create a cloud security best practices checklist, right? What should be in place? And then maybe even being able, if we could build a database or a kind of a web front end. And Chip, this is what I'm wondering from a Graph API perspective, what could be available. And then build a database so that you could compare to others, of similar size and complexity. Would that be of interest? And he immediately said, well, not only is it of interest, he said, you're basically looking at, third party, which obviously cloud providers are. And he said, with the FTC regulations coming out, et cetera, he goes, absolutely. I think it could sell it all day long. So I'll pause there, Jim. Did I kind of set the stage on what we're trying to
totally
collaboratively talk about?
And what's cool is that, we're here at IT Nation having these conversations, and it's just validating everything that we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm. So anybody have any comments first? And have you at all seen this guide ever? And just love to get your initial impressions of the idea, if anyone wants to start. Andy, how about you? You always have really good insight, especially
No, I'm just saying here's a great opportunity for us to create, in my view, web content, talking about each one of these things over time. I'm finding, or at least I am of the belief, that we have to communicate complicated or technical concepts to the population at large, and relating this to how they secure their home or they protect their car or their other belongings is really valuable. And making this more easily consumable is a key aspect to this, because they don't understand, they don't buy what they don't understand. They don't implement what is unknown, and how to raise the general awareness and translate this into what everyone relates to day by day, right? Food security, for example, they inspect restaurants, but they're not checking businesses, for example.
Yeah, really, really good point. I said it, Jim, to Jim at lunch. It's like, what I would relate it to is, most people, not all, would at least once a year get a physical, get a checkup, to see how you're doing. And it's like, that's my analogy to a customer. Wouldn't you at least want to know where you are today? At least compare, if you're not, wouldn't you want to know how you're doing at least to your peers? Are you good? Are you horrible? Are you awesome? Because, if you have, let's just say, diabetes or high cholesterol, wouldn't you want to address it now instead of finding out a long time from now? So I don't know if that kind of resonates with what you're saying, Andy.
You're on mute, Andy. Andy, you're on mute.
Is he trying to talk?
Yeah, same talk.
Sorry, I was going to say most people don't even go to the doctor because they don't want to know, right? They're living in denial. And I think that's the way a lot of businesses operate, is that things have changed so rapidly that they don't get why this is all evolving. And I'm so into this that I often forget what level I need to communicate at. And it's really up to me to communicate at that level.
Yeah, that's a really good point. As Gary Pico likes to say, why do I care more about your security than you do?
Right.
You know what I mean? I love that saying.
Yeah.
Chip, any thoughts on, if you were to, just because I love your mind and how it works, and what's possible here, at least from technically from a either Microsoft secure score from the graph, are things, what is possible from your mind's eye, and other things you'd want to build into a checklist?
Yeah, there's quite a bit that's possible, and the development team is already working on expanding our reporting section around this notion based upon feedback that we picked up 3 weeks ago from several of the participants in this call. When SaaS alerts, when we first conceived the SaaS alerts, we really didn't think very much about what I call the configuration and state information, because we operated under the assumption that the end user community and the MSP community already had a handle on that and wouldn't need us to build it. But we have learned through feedback from this group and other sources that it's very useful for us to be able to provide not only a configuration and state report that matches up to best practices, but also comparative data of how a particular customer organization looks in comparison to the rest. And our initial discussion around that was, well, why don't we just give Microsoft security score? But we decided against that, actually. And we're developing our own set of metrics that would take into account the Microsoft security best practices settings, but also the kind of alert information that comes back and individual setting information that comes back, even within SaaS alerts, in terms of what kind of alerts are set for the different severity levels and whether or not people are using whitelisting effectively, using file triggers effectively, those sorts of things, to come up with a score that's unique to the customers that we're monitoring now in SaaS alerts. So, across 600 partners, it's approaching 1 million users at this point, or user accounts that we're monitoring. So there's actually a lot of data for us to evaluate and come up with a unique score. We can add in to that and this is feedback that I'd like to hear from the team. Do you want to see us just report the Microsoft security score as well alongside that? That's something that I think we can do, coming from Microsoft's APIs. But is it really useful to do that, or is it really only useful for us to develop a standalone metric that is comparative within the community?
Yeah, really, really good framing. Any thoughts on that, folks?
Anybody but Andy. We've got to make somebody else jump into the breach here. I know Andy's got thoughts.
Mark. Yeah, and in my question too, Mark, is it because we dealt a lot with this in cyber CNS, right? Mark, is the score nebulous? Like, what does it mean, right? And is it really something that's meaningful? Right?
Exactly. Exactly. And how does it, to their business and stuff? Yeah, we want to make sure everything's secure, but telling the client that, hey, your score, your Microsoft score and there goes, they get glazed eyes. I actually had a meeting this morning with a client and showed them the security score, just trying to introduce it. And they could just came back, hey, you guys are handling our security, so I just trust you. Mm-hmm. But some of those things are important, of course, but I think we do have to have a scoring mechanism of some sort, though.
Mm-hmm. And how do you guys feel about, because Andrew and I were talking about this at lunch. I've always been, he actually reminded me of how much of a fan I am of benchmarking.
Yeah.
But how would you guys feel about having essentially a database where you could look in and see how a customer of a specific size is doing compared to other companies of similar size relative to their security score? Is that useful?
Got it, Andy.
My request would be to do that by industry. So if it was healthcare or manufacturing or retail or distribution, just so they can get a sense of what their risk profile might be. Mm-hmm. So being able to define a risk profile and then giving those scores relative to that profile.
Got it. Dave, did you have a comment?
So Andy, how would you suggest we at SaaS Alerts track your customer organizations by industry? I mean, specifically, that's something we don't do today. We try and remain as non-invasive as possible. So is that something that you would actually want us to see starting to do?
What if we put in a profile for the customer in SaaS Alerts and say, here's what it is. This is healthcare have a greater risk, or is their data more valuable, or are they more likely to be audited? Those would all be attributes, I would think, that you'd want to potentially be able to take into account. And I can look at the HHS Wall of Shame, for example, as, hey, hey, here's an example. Here's one way to look at this. I'm trying to connect these dots because ultimately the doctors are deciding where they want to direct their resources, and they don't see value still in some compliance requirements.
Okay. Is there anybody else on the call have a reaction to that? To SaaS actually embedding profile data of business type and are there other attributes that you'd want to see, or does anybody actually have concerns about that we'd be taking it too far in terms of collecting sort of demographic data on the customer organization?
Well, I think a baseline, would give you, a benchmark for customers to, reach for their security levels. So anything like that would give you some sort of a metrics to show them where they, standard should be and where they are would be helpful.
At least in right, Dave, maybe even bare minimum in a assessment mode, right? Where
absolutely, yeah. No, this is strictly, I'm talking about assessing too. So yeah.
Really good point. Go ahead, Andy.
I was going to just say the idea of comparing then one medical practice to another, or by region, or by if I start to get into this, then I'm able to say, here's one ophthalmologist versus another, or another orthopedic or an optometrist, and say, you're way below the average on this. Do you want to be hung out on this, so to speak?
Right. Well, I guess it's conceivable that in the sign-up process, that when you're adding a customer organization, if there was a drop down for industry, you just selected whatever industry that company is in, that would give us a mechanism from there to at least start that benchmarking comparison.
Yeah, some vertical.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to continue to challenge everybody on this. Is security for a medical practice any different than it should be for a law office, or for somebody who's manufacturing, I don't know, tires? Like, should it really be different?
Best practices are best practices. I mean, there shouldn't be a huge difference. I mean, there's different types of information that they're dealing with, but your best practices are going to protect that, regardless of the industry or vertical.
Chip, I agree with what you said, but like, for instance, in healthcare, you have to deal with a 36-page PDF generated by somebody over at the federal government. And if they walk in through that door, they can ask you to show me any one of those 36 points, and you have to be answerable to those things. Otherwise, you could be penalized 50 grand plus. So I think it depends on the regulation of the industry, because there's some more pain that could be involved with being sloppy with your security.
Yeah. So now you're on to something, Leron. I mean, Andy, as someone who has a lot of clients in the healthcare space, I assume it would be useful to you, and you would be willing to help us pull together a one-touch report that hits on those 36 audit points that somebody that's coming in for a HIPAA audit is going to hit on, and says, here's all the cloud-based stuff, all the software as a service components, and how they're covered.
Why don't we raise that to a level of NIST cybersecurity framework, and then it applies to multiple industries and multiple times, because now I'm able to map HIPAA to NIST, and you're able to map the PCI DSS to NIST. You're able to map other requirements. I think you standardize to that framework, and you communicate that this matches this framework element, right? And here are the pieces.
We have done that, by the way. I'm not sure if anyone shared that with you, but we actually have a NIST mapping document that we share with partners, upon request, of exactly which features that are monitored, or actually user actions are mapped to which NIST control.
So what I'm doing with my customers is I first make them aware, here's where I believe you want to go. And once they agree, we say, then here are the policies you need to make sure you have in place. And then we begin to build our solution around that, and we address each of those elements. So if you give me a report that says, hey, you don't have multi-factor authentication, this is called for, here, you don't have, encryption set up right, or you don't have expiring links to your documents, this is another potential violation here. Being able to tie this back to that framework would be very helpful for us. Then we're able to say, this is why we're doing in this framework, and then it's applicable across multiple industries.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. I think also, Andy, in that, simplistic report I showed you guys from Cyber CNS about, a week or so ago, being able to tie it to the business impact, right? What lack of MFA does, here's a few, maybe like, here's a, 2 paragraphs on case study A, Colonial Pipeline, and lack of MFA on VPN. Case study B, and what were the financial repercussions of these 2, incidences. So, by the way, Chip, I just want to go back to something you said, because it's really interesting in terms of, what your capability is today and where you're headed, because you said about configuration, state, and change in state. I mean, there's literally 2 products that come right to mind that are making headway that I think, it would be cool if you guys started, when and if ready, to put that kind of state. Like, there's the company called Simian Cloud. That's that's they're large mid-market companies. It's almost impossible for them. They're managing spreadsheets of what the standards should be and where they are and what the state changes of those configuration settings are. And then there's the open source one by Kelvin Tagelar, CIPP, but you got to really know what you're doing with that one and really understand PowerShell scripts, etc. So did you mention that for a reason, the state changes and the configurations? Is that something, you guys are considering?
It is, and we started down that path in the reports module, specifically around the MFA report, who has MFA enabled, who has it enforced, and we include self-service password reset on that report as well. So that, that's a state analysis component. That's not an event that occurs moment by moment, which was SaaS Alert's original mission, was to capture user actions, translate them into events, and then alert where possible. But those other state elements have proved important and valuable in some instances. So we're going to continue to expand in that realm. I think, the holy grail for us is to be able to give a comparative state and configuration report across all of the products that we monitor, and just say, look, here's the sort of the international standard. If you were NIST certified or ISO certified or following these best practices, this is what your configuration for 365 would look like. This is what Slack would look like. This is what Google Workspace or Salesforce would look like. And this, just compare that in a very, very simple report that a partner could run against any organization at any time.
Yeah, that'd be
So
awesome. What do you guys think?
The change state has value if you're able to say, this is where you were, let's say October 1st, and this is where things have changed from to November, and maybe do that in a way for establishing what could be called safe harbor. Is that, hey, look, we've been making these changes on a regular basis, and that shows us progress, right? That kind of rolling document. I'm thinking something similar to like a line guard with IT Glue, how he's able to keep track of the changes for us and have it documented.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chip, what are your thoughts on that?
My thoughts immediately go to the changes in data storage and cost. So we'd have to think about that, versus having the partner being responsible for running reports on a regular basis, and they can track state on their own. But we can address it. We'd have to, honestly, this is an open forum, and we try and be completely transparent with you guys. We'd have to look at the impact on cost that something like that might have, in terms of storing, much broader amounts of data over longer periods of time.
Would you be able to dump it to IT Glue, for example, and have them bear that cost?
I don't think IT Glue's API today gives us the opportunity to manipulate the client instance on the backside in the way Microsoft or Google Workspace does. That's actually fairly unique to those 2 products, that they provide what you can think of as a reverse API. It's one thing to query and read information. It's another whole kettle of fish to push data back through an API. But we're developing a good enough relationship with them that we could certainly talk about it. I think that would be a fantastic solution, Andy. Like, that would be great if we were able to push reports back into IT Glue. That would be.
So my experience with LionGuard is they're able to auto create and build their own data structures within IT Glue. Just sharing that with you.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just curious, from just a poll question, if you will, for everybody, like if someone could jump on and give their thoughts, but is it important for cloud, standards in the cloud for you? And, is that something, in theory you'd want to have across customer bases and, configuration state and change across customers? Yeah, Andy?
No, I'm saying yes. I'm raising my hand. If you're doing a poll question, I'm answering affirmative.
Yeah. I know. I appreciate it. I mean, like I said, there's literally businesses being sprouted up, like, and doing well on this piece. I think certainly more so in the mid market. I'm just curious. Certainly for our efficiencies, it makes sense. In the mid market, I think up, or larger pieces of the small business segment, 100 employees and up, if there could be an IT person. Is anybody, having those conversations about keeping things in proper standards with those internal IT teams? Anybody doing co-managed on this call? I guess not. Okay.
Speaking of co-managed, after we're done with this topic, I do want to make sure we have enough time. We've got a huge release coming out, Andrew.
Jim, it's out.
Oh,
It's out.
so let's talk about what you guys got out. Let's go.
Okay. The man of the hour, Leron. We got it out early.
So just as a point of reference, right, we typically release twice a week, 6 to 10 issues. We had one release that had 31 issues. So this is, I'd say, on average, 3 times bigger than what we release. I'm going to share my screen, and as much as I love talking, I prefer showing. So hopefully I have the ability to do that.
Don't lie, Leron. We know you don't like talking.
All right. So for the first thing that we've done, so I'm logged into production. So the first thing that we've done is we've changed the overview page, since I have yet to see someone or hear someone come to me with the old overview page and say, I really love that page, or that page is so useful. Like, it just hasn't happened. So we wanted to kind of give it a new paint job and kind of give it an update. The other thing that we've done, which is kind of a small milestone for our development team, is we've given it a version that is 1 something. If you guys previously had paid attention, it was always 0 point something, right? So now it's an actual number there. But I do want to pause, because you can tell I'm excited about this. We have a new team member that I want to briefly introduce. Her name is Amanda Robinson. She's starting here. Today is her 3rd day, and she is going to be a product manager, and she's going to be responsible for our Respond product as well as reports. So officially, welcome, Amanda. All right, so coming back to this. Now, we also know that as technology people, when we sign up to a new product, some of us may not want the onboarding call. Some of us may want to say, I'm going to figure this out on my own. So when that happens, right, what do I need to do? And I find it helpful, and have seen plenty of other applications that tell you these are the things that you need to do. So if you were to sign up completely on your own, go ahead and add organization and connect to product, query some data on the analysis screen, customize the alert severity, go to the report scheduler, and create a custom role in a template. So each of these has a link to support, to a support article, as well as the call to action that takes you to the place where this is taking place. And then when you finish something, we go ahead and give you this. I know most of you guys have already done this. And so if you're like me, and it annoys you to see something incomplete, go ahead and just mark all those as done. But this is mostly for our new folks who are joining. And then on the other hand, sometimes when I'm playing with an application and I get into it about as far as I can, and at that point, I want to talk to a person. So when that time comes, you can hit the request onboarding button, and Anthony, who's on this call, we have his calendar right here. So if you want to meet with Anthony tonight, he's available at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard. So back to our dashboard here. We also have our release notes. That was some good feedback that we had from partners was, what's in this release? I don't know what's in this release. So now we're giving you the highlights of what's in this release. Now I mentioned 31 items. The majority of those are things that are not that interesting, but these are the interesting things. There's a link here to a support article that has some additional details, but the highlights are provided here. I'll quickly go through these and I will show you role-based access control with groups, overview screen redesign. We've also made significant performance improvements to the way that we get Microsoft data. We, after a few oopsies, added an additional step prior to when an organization is deleted. We've also refactored the way that Microsoft products, when you create a Microsoft connection, we've refactored that. We've learned a lot of valuable lessons with thousands of Microsoft connections. And so we are taking those lessons and we are implementing changes to improve those. There's still work to be done on that side, but we've taken the first steps to do that. We're also showing the rule trigger history. The analysis table, its limit was increased from 10,000 records to 40,000 records in our journey to make that table basically have no limit, but that takes a while for us to get there. And then we're also are logging an internal event. So when you add or remove a PSA, like you log in one day and your PSA connection is gone all of a sudden, and you want to know who did that, you are going to be able to know who did that. It will be logged as an internal event. Why don't I pause here and see if there's any questions about anything I've said so far, but just keep in mind the next place I plan to go to is show you what role-based access control looks like.
Looks like you've been busy, Laurent.
What's that?
So it looks like you've been busy.
Yeah, so for those of you that I've been ignoring and you're like, wow, he's such a jerk, why isn't he getting back to me? It's because we've been working on this. So yeah, very excited. Let's get into the role-based access control. Now, before we get into this, I want to just highlight that we are using a two-phased approach with this. In the first phase, we implemented features to help you control what you can see. And in the next iteration of this, we're going to be adding features to help you control what your users can do. So this is mostly a visibility-based component. And the use case for this, for what I'm about to show you is, we've had partners come to us, and I was a little shocked when I heard this, but they have customers who, for some reason, need to see the security data. They want to see the security data. So they want to get them access into the application. But as you know, today, that's not really something that is feasible. So that's one use case. Another use case is we work with a lot of MSSPs, and they want to get their partners on here, and it's obviously not going to work if you're looking at other MSPs and employees and things like that. So let's get into this. First thing you'll notice is the video on the right. It was our full intention to have a how-to video here, and the reason that this is here is because we needed a placeholder for our video, but every time we shot the video, there was some sort of bug, so I could never actually do it. And by the time we got to code complete, we just wanted to ship it. So rest assured, this will go away, but it wasn't enough to hold up the release. So
this will go away unless you guys decide it's a permanent comedy feature you want and a rotating video from the 1980s.
you know what?
It made me laugh.
Yeah, and if I would actually love if that were to be a thing, because that would mean I don't have to record the video. So let's please do that. So this does come out in beta, and I have enabled this particular partner for the beta. So you're going to see a little orange thing that says this is a beta, contact your account manager or support, and there are email links to do that. So and you could also email me during this meeting, after this meeting, whatever, leron@saasalerts.com if you want access to this. So let's go ahead and turn it on, because we fully understand that this isn't right for everyone. So I'm going to turn it on. And as you can see, I haven't done anything in here. So this is going to be a live test, and those are always the best for the person who's driving. So let's go ahead and build a group in production, and we're going to call it test group. We need to add an organization. So SaaS Alerts Prod 123 sounds good. And I do have a test MSP user that I created, and it's this person. So as an MSP admin, you are always going to see everything all the time. But if you have techs that should only be working on one organization or a particular set of organizations, this is what you can start doing here. So let's go ahead and create this group. Now this is the logged in user right here. So let's go side by side. Okay, so on the left, MSP admin, on the right is my end user. So when I've enabled this, right, you guys saw I had a bunch of different organizations. This MSP user currently sees nothing because I haven't created this group yet. When I hit create group, this now appears. And this MSP user, when they log in, as far as they're concerned, there are no other organizations inside of here. So if this is my customer and they want access, I give them access. They can go, they can look at the overview screen, tickets, applications, critical alerts, medium alerts. I'll actually give it time to load. So when I hit this customer dropdown, if we did everything right, the only customer that should appear in this dropdown is SaaS Alerts Prod 123. Let's compare that against my admin medium alerts, and you'll see I'm getting a whole bunch more in the drop down here. This also applies to the analyze screen. So really now you have the ability to get additional users and control what they can see. And when we release our next version of this, we'll be able to control what they can do. So a use case for that is Anthony asked me the other day, hey, we want to have a billing person come in here, and we only want them to have access to the billing report. So in the future, when we release that, you can create a custom user role, and that custom user role will only be able to access the billing report. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that this is a two-phased project here. But why don't I pause here and see if we have questions?
Loren, will I be able to give limited respond commands to the role-based authentication as well?
Yeah, so that's a great question. As you can see, there is no respond here, but there is respond here. And that is because in today's world, we decided, look, we have to make decisions, right? When we build this product, and maybe they're not always the right decisions, but we kind of always knew in the back of our minds that we're going to be creating these custom roles. And with a custom role, like, I feel like no matter what decision we make, right, as a user, I'd want to customize it, right? So in the future, you'll be able to do that with the custom roles, but today you can't. And that's because when we released Respond, we made the decision that only admins should be able to use Respond, given the fact that you can do some pretty dangerous things if you don't know what you're doing inside of Respond. And we just didn't feel comfortable with the security implications of letting non-admins do that. Hopefully that answers your question, Andy.
I was asking more specifically. Let's say I have multiple respond options, and I want to give a specific respond action available to co-managed or someone who wants this report or to let staff, where they'd be able to do this on demand, but not have admin access.
Not in today's version, but when we get into roles, right? In this version, we're focused on what you can see, although I guess given what he just said, you can easily make the argument that that falls into that category. But I would say when we do the roles, custom roles, you will be able to do that.
All right, cool, thanks.
So believe it or not, this is actually the first time I'm saying this with all of you. Chip and Leron, keep as much from me as possible. So this is a legitimate question, and Andrew and I were just actually talking off camera about it because it's actually technically his idea, and I think it's a really good one. So Leron, in theory, let's just say an MSP has a prospect, right? And they don't want to give credentials up to the MSP yet because it's still a prospect. They could end up, correct me if I'm wrong, but in theory, what they could do is they could go in, set up that client org, and then push roll down to that organization, and they could do their own, they could put in their own credentials and basically run their own assessment. True?
Yeah, the answer to that is true, because again, on the right, I'm logged in as my test user who only has this. So imagine there's nothing here. I could just go ahead and create a brand new organization, assign it to the only group that I'm in, do the whitelisting. Again, it doesn't look ideal, right? Because of the split screen situation, but I can now go ahead and initiate a Microsoft connection, and I would have that here. I mean, I can actually do it if you're willing to wait a second.
Would you be able to do this with specific reporting as well, so that they wouldn't necessarily have all the reports, but just ones that assess the vulnerabilities? So we're basically tagging what respond or what reports they can run.
That will be in the custom roles, right? Like we have, I don't know, 8, 10 reports today. And what you'd be able to do with that custom role is say, user role A has access to all reports, user role B only has access to the MFA report, etc.
Okay.
So what are folks thinking about this? First of all, just that capability right there, just to be able to essentially create permissions for people to do their own assessments. And obviously you're getting them as well. You're giving them the ability to do this, right? Like thoughts. So I'd love to get your perspectives on it. Helpful? Game changing?
What about different tiers, Jim, about who's looking at it? If you have an IT person, they're going to want the detail. If you're going to have a manager or someone evaluating your capability and competency, wouldn't you want to have this even summarized more succinctly to say, you know, these are the problem areas that you have, and, you know, they could click and drill down on it and build that into something that they could more easily relate to and consume?
I guess more consumable than the reports we already have, because those are really.
That I'm looking at this report. I don't know that a practice admin or a doctor or even a CEO would want to see this level of detail.
No, this isn't the report I'm speaking of.
Yeah,
So
okay.
it's the actual in the reporting module. So like the reports that you run, do you take advantage of the reports module, Andy?
I do. And what primarily it's what I get when there's a, these are the threats. I'm trying to think of how we would present this to a prospect. So overall, to give them, out of a possible 100 points, you're at, 70, for example. And how does that break down? Well, you have, your score is decreased because you have exposed links that never expire, that are anonymous. You have passwords that aren't multi-factor. We can go down the list in big brush strokes.
Right.
Kind of take, go ahead.
Look, I think that's a great place to go, kind of going back to the previous conversations we're having around, sharing scores and benchmarking and all that. But I'm just talking right now, like this is a new capability just to be able to allow someone to run their own report and show them the customer facing reports that we have, right? Like from a prospecting perspective, just putting my old MSP sales hat on, right? Like when I ran Thrive, like I would love to be able to provide that to the customer. But I don't know, maybe it's just me, maybe I'm crazy, but what are your thoughts? I mean, is that helpful? Bueller?
Cricket? I mean, I sure hope it's helpful because we've had a ton of partners ask for this so that they can share and co-management directly with their end customers and prospects.
Yeah, I mean, if no one's, I don't think many are doing co-managed here based on my question, Chip, and I agree with you. I mean, we dealt with this nonstop at Cyber CNS. So that's why I'm wondering for prospects, you have prospects like that might say, well, we really don't want to give you credentials to our M365 environment with this. Would you be psyched about this?
Yeah, I mean, we got some feedback in the chat regarding it, so there's some
okay.
positive.
Okay.
I think everyone's just kind of shy Thursday.
Or it's postprandial lunch, coma.
Right.
Jim, if you hadn't missed our one-on-one, we would have been able to cover this. So.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. I was getting on different planes to try to get down here to IT Nation based on my canceled flight. So
of course. Is there anything else that you want to see while we're here? Okay. Well, in that case, I'll hand it back to you guys.
Cool.
Thanks, Leron.
That's awesome, Leron.
Yeah, Leron, thank you very much for sharing and great work by you and the team. I know that was a heavy lift. So hoping people can start using it, seeing the real benefit from it.
Chip, just like ballpark for you, and do you have a sense of some of the assessment stuff when you're aiming to have it out?
Early 2023. We've got a number of items that we're still wrapping up on the roadmap. So it's going to be into next year when we bring the assessment elements out.
Okay.
Who knows? Maybe we can do a big reveal at Right a Boom.
That's an idea. That'd be a really cool idea.
Yeah. By the way, hopefully everyone.
Right a Boom?
Hopefully we can do a big reveal on the new assessment stuff at Right a Boom. Hopefully everyone on this call is registered for Right a Boom. If not, you're missing out on the I think the best cybersecurity conference in our entire ecosystem.
It's February 22nd to the 24th.
Yeah.
Would there be a way, Chip, from your perspective, as we kind of circling back when we kicked today off to having these essentials, that people could, get information like, hey, I think, I'd love to see if we could, assess this or that in M365. Is there an easy way you'd want to hear from partners or us to collect that data?
The easiest way is to to submit an enhancement request right directly through the UI. You can do that right in the SaaS Alerts UI. You can also just email support at SaaSalerts.com. And if you title your email enhancement request, our support team knows exactly what to do with that. The more that we get that are the same or similar, that we can put them in the same bucket, obviously that impacts how we evaluate the roadmap. When we see that there's a lot of partners that are asking for something like this feature Leron just showed us today, we had many dozens of partners saying, look, we have got to have the ability for our end customers to log into the user interface and manage their own stuff and view it directly, because it reduces our workload as a partner. So that's one of the reasons why this was pushed to the top of the stack.
And I gotta believe security too, right, Chip? That was a big driver too for those, IT teams that are co-managed. I love it. And what I was also seeing if I haven't gotten much sleep being at IT Nation, but I had a fleeting thought. Let me see if I can get it back momentarily. Jim, if you could just
So, we've obviously today we talked a little bit more about the assessment stuff. We've dialed in on role-based access control, and hopefully you're going to be able to leverage that, right, for prospects now even more effectively. So next week we'll be able to tackle some more stuff, but you get the.
Yeah, I did. The memory came back. So Bo Bullock from Black Hills is going to be doing, I'll iterate our webinar on the 15th. One of the best in the business on doing cloud security assessments. That's something I really hope you guys come for. And then I'm going to ask him point blank, if you could wave a wand, but what would you be, assessing, right? That could be potentially automated with Microsoft's Graph and things like that. What would you want to know from just a one-time perspective from a hygiene? So maybe we'll get some really good answers there from him.
Yeah. And Michelle, if you wouldn't mind posting right now the link for that webinar. Awesome. Thank you. One step ahead of me. So for those folks that haven't signed up for that, we're getting a ton of people for that one. So I think it'll be a good one. So
Awesome.
okay. Well, I think we can give some time back here.
Yeah.
We got 7 minutes left, but
Unless anybody has something,
Yeah.
Jim, but I'm thrilled with what you guys did. Leron, that's huge. Like I know what a game changer, like I said, it was at Cyber CNS. Like I said, you guys, I think being able to, prospect and even do like I was telling Jim, maybe like a lunch and learn where you ask 15 of your prospects to come on, you present cloud security to them, and then say, hey, by the way, I created a user for each of you. Check your email. And if you want to do it right now, you can take a look at your posture.
yeah. So it's all good. Well, everybody, thank you for participating in another SaaS MSP call. Andrew, thank you.
Yeah.
Chip, Leron, great work on this latest release. Hopefully people can dig in and start taking advantage of it. And look forward to seeing everyone next week.
Awesome.
Yeah. Thanks,
Hey,
everybody.
guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Keep your head low down there.
Yeah.